Good afternoon. It's Wednesday the 9th of August, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. My name's David Scott and I'm joined today by Deborah Evans, by Alex Thomson and by Di McMillan. We're going to start with Alex and we're looking at his specialist subject, which is, of course, spying.
And yes, things have not been quiet in the world of British spookdom. The BBC is leading from the middle of last month on the story that the British government is amending its legislative proposals for encrypted message scanning. If you tap that, David, we'll see the details here. The first image there was of WhatsApp, which is the best known so-called end-to-end encryption service, although, of course, there's no guarantee that you're not being key-logged by devices on your software, on your hardware. But the latest amendment in this massive legislative ping pong, which has been going on for a year or more, to the Online Safety Bill, is a sort of safeguard and reassurance in the spirit of liberty. But all it amounts to is that now, rather than having people automatically subjected to scanning of encrypted messages, now the regulator Ofcom, well known to UK Column for its various claims on the internet, will have to consult a so-called skilled person before they actually go ahead and scan encrypted messages. There's also a SOP to the idea of testing for the freedom of expression and privacy and whether less intrusive methods are at hand before going on. But the bill is empowering Ofcom. There's no doubt about that. The next slide takes this further because we see that the Record, very good on these matters, has picked up from last month that my old employer, GCHQ, Britain's Signals Intelligence Agency, could be monitoring what's known as internet logs in real time. And here, the excuses given are the old standby child pornographers. So if you object, you must be morally turpid, is the argument. And also fraud. So the detail on that we'll bring up now, which is that the reviewer, Lord Anderson, previously plain old David Anderson, who until a couple of years ago, until 2017, was the so-called independent reviewer of terrorist legislation, he's quoted in a new report, which again is part of the ping pong between government and so-called independent people. The link will be in the show notes to read not just this press report by the Record, but the original report from last month, in which Lord Anderson is not quite convinced because he says that these logs, which is what sites you visited, could be used to search for who was using legitimate banking applications and malicious control points at the same time. Improved access, as he's reviewing what the government wants to do at GCHQ, is it would enable GCHQ to detect fraud more efficiently and inform police or law enforcement, as it says here, of the identity of fraudsters. And of course, they're also cooking up a scenario in which they can heroically nab child sex offenders. They can't arrest, they don't have such powers, but they can tip off the police. And in the name of that, we're apparently all to be subjected or possibly subjected, theoretically capable of being subjected to seeing what our internet logs are, which of course the ISPs in Britain, your service providers, are obliged by law to keep for a year. The Daily Telegraph has gone to the stage of pre-crime. It's reporting that Ken McCallum, the boss of MI5, or the British Security Service, the domestic intelligence agency, told students at Glasgow University just last month that he's using AI in rather eyebrow-raising ways. He said that when he became a spy back in the more or less non-digital age, I think the 80s, in his case, you had trouble because you had armies of people like me in my old job with headphones on, and he correctly describes this as painstaking. This is why UK Column does so few transcripts and subtitles. It is very painstaking. But McCallum says that we can do this now, but we can't use, he doesn't use proprietary names, but he says we can't use YouTube or other commercial solutions, commercial off-the-shelf solutions, because they're not very accurate, even though they're startlingly more accurate than they used to be. What this means is that you can have an automatic printout of anyone that you're suspecting of what they're saying on the phone. You don't even need to hire these expensive transcribers who make mistakes. But this dream is now within McCallum's reach. He thinks that by feeding the beast with AI, and he's boasting of this to Glasgow University students, they can actually at MI5 get better and better at it and inform themselves of what's going on. I don't think this will ever fly. Look at the interview we did on artificial intelligence recently with two experts, Jobst Landgraber and Barry Smith, for details of why not. Finally, in this segment, Wired.com is picking up on, and we've reported on angles of this before, lobbying that's going on by the security industry, we can call it, which would allow NSA, the equivalent of GCHQ in the USA, which works more or less as one agency with GCHQ, and a bunch of other agencies to go round the back of existing bans on them getting bulk data, which again is not content, but who was talking to whom. And so legislators on the Hill are trying to prevent that. Reclaim the Net is reporting on one downfall of the security state. This is something where Britain leads the way, but this story comes from Detroit in the USA, which is facial recognition software, which we're always told is the greatest tool that British law enforcement has in its panoply at the moment, leading the world. The US has also been coming up to speed on this, but this lady in Detroit, Portia Woodruff, is suing the city of Detroit because she was an arrest warrant was issued for her based on facial recognition data, and she was arrested. That warrant was executed against her at home in front of her children. She was just a month short of delivering a baby at the time, but the police didn't stop and think, can this heavily pregnant woman be the carjacker we're after? No, they said the computer says you are, and there's an 8-year gap between your mugshot going into the system and this current warrant going out, and they didn't even bother to check with the police, or the police at the other end wouldn't tell them whether the suspect that was being looked for in carjacking was a heavily pregnant woman or not.
And here we see once again that's not AI is not the fix-all, the infallible tool that it's been often painted, and there are problems and unforeseen consequences. Thanks very much for that, Alex. We'll go across now to Di McMillan. Now, Di is a professional working in the property sector, and particularly want to talk to you today, Di, about the nature of the rented housing market and the problems that both tenants and landlords are facing. Could you maybe just give a brief outline of some of the difficulties that are currently affecting the market?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As David says, I work in the rental market in Glasgow in Scotland. We are seeing a mass exodus of small landlords from the rental market. Now, the impact on that is obvious in there is a reducing and quickly reducing number of available properties for people to rent, either as a family home or shared accommodation, where young professionals or students are concerned. This really is being pushed by a number of things. The introduced legislation and taxation system that's being introduced in such a way that your smaller landlords just can't make a rental property a viable proposition, in that if you're in business, you can't operate in such a way where you're making losses and you are subsidizing people's housing. That's not a landlord's job, and it's just not viable.
Okay, thanks, Di. We've got a few stories in this area that I'd like to look at and comment on. The first one here is from Glasgow, and it's the leader of Glasgow City Council, and they're calling on the owners of vacant buildings to be forced to sell if they don't invest in repair or restore the properties. So this is going to be a compulsory sales order rather than the compulsory purchase order that we know from years gone by, and they recognise it's a radical approach, and it does not exist in law right now. So this is a new legal innovation to force sales on unwilling sellers, all for the greater good, you'll understand. Now, this has been floating around in Scotland for some time. So here we see the compulsory sales order being discussed by the Scottish Land Commission. The intention is to provide a mechanism to enable local authorities to bring problematic vacant sites and buildings back into productive use. So it's the state directing the private sector. There's a name for that. And they go into the rationale for this. Now, it says here that the rationale is firmly grounded in economic theory. I would question that. And it says one of the reasons that the sites remain vacant is essentially the owners are looking for too much money and they're misjudging the market. I suspect that's a very partial and inaccurate assessment of actually what is causing that problem. Because why would someone want a derelict site rather than cash? There seems to be much more to it than meets the eye, but this is being touted as a solution. There is a flow chart. We'll put this on screen here, and you'll see that there's a point where the owners can make an appeal if they don't like this order being placed on them. But it's during a short 3-month period, so there's not long. And the flow chart doesn't actually explain what to do if the appeal's successful. So that's a little bit worrying. Also, they do admit that more than 25% of the derelict sites in cities are actually publicly owned. They're owned by the state, they're owned by the government anyway. And it would be nice, I would have thought, that if they would have actually tackled that problem first. Now, back to Di. So this is all about a kind of legal and financial assault on property owners. Are you seeing that on the ground?
It's very obvious, and in actual fact, the question of compulsory sales orders, when it was reported on in Scotland in the newspapers, there was a pair of billionaire brothers, former, I think it was Rangers Football Club or directors of one of the football clubs, who had purchased a vacant building in the centre of Glasgow. Now, they have invested heavily in this property. However, after I think 3 years of their ownership, it still remains vacant, having had no work essentially done on it. Now, this is down to planning. This is down to the mechanisms that our councils and our Scottish government have in place that at this point do not allow for development in such a way that it's beneficial to the owner. Our governments seem to be quite keen to ensure that any developments that are done are beneficial to them.
And this legal and regulation environment is, of course, part of the problem, and it's not been discussed. And we're not looking at it. We will be discussing it in extra time, but the state is very reluctant to look at the unintended consequences of its own actions. Now, on the political side, we have here the Telegraph reported some time ago, landlords are selling up en masse. It's a toxic cocktail of high mortgage rates and reduced tax relief destroy the buy-to-let business model. And Ross Greer, Scottish politician, tweeted this out with the phrase tiny violin. He was clearly not impressed or sympathetic. And he later went on to say that landlords are not contributing anything useful to society. And he said that the Green Party is exceptionally proud to be delivering protections for tenants from within the Scottish Government. We are supporting the many families who are struggling through the cost of living crisis and fundamentally shifting the balance of power. It's always about the balance of power, you understand, between exploitative landlords and their tenants. Well, the exploitative landlords and the tenants, it's quite clear who's getting the blame. Di, how would you respond to that? And is there much political harm being done to the rental market?
I think that Ross Greer's comments are utterly outrageous. I think that when you consider that private landlords contribute approximately 25% of the housing stock, and I don't just mean the rental stock, I mean the entire housing stock is provided by private landlords. Now, private landlords, in the majority are just simple individuals, not monopolizing conglomerates of huge portfolios. You're talking about people who are like my own son or your children who have entered into a relationship, got married, and so now they have a surplus property that they rent out instead of selling in the way of, this is going to be part of my pension. Now, they could put that money into a pension. However, it doesn't help in the societal way of providing housing for people who require it. And, the councils are not providing enough housing. And so it's left to the private sector to provide properties for people who require them. And, we get no support whatsoever. We are demonised.
Thank you very much, Di. We'll explore this further in extra time. I hope you can join us for that. And we're now moving on to Debi Evans. Debi, I think you want to start off with a video.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. And yes, I'd like to show a piece of video. Senator Malcolm Roberts, how to question Pfizer. Listen out to what Pfizer employees received in the way of a jab. Let's watch the little video we've got.
Senator, Pfizer has had no involvement in relation to ivermectin.
Does the indemnity you have with the government extend to providing you with indemnity in the situation where an employee is forced by their employer to undergo vaccination and then experiences harm? And if you do have indemnity, I want the proof.
Senator, any indemnity agreements between Pfizer and the Australian government are confidential, and we are not able to discuss that in this forum.
Why are they confidential? Because as a taxpayer, I paid for those injections, even though I didn't take any. Why are they confidential from taxpayers? 26 million Australians.
Senator,
what are you hiding?
Senator, indemnity agreements between the Australian government and private organisations such as Pfizer are confidential. I'm not at liberty to discuss that.
Why are they confidential? The people who paid for these injections cannot see what they've actually bought. Why are they confidential? Why are you hiding?
Senator, those indemnity agreements, indeed contractual arrangements, as is always the case between the Australian government and external parties, are confidential. And I don't have any information today that might assist the committee in relation to that.
Did or does Pfizer have COVID vaccine mandates for your own employees in Australia?
At the height of the pandemic and consistent with guidance from health authorities, from the New South Wales and Victorian governments, Pfizer did have a colleague vaccination program for its employees.
Do you still have it?
That the requirement for colleague vaccination for Pfizer employees is currently present. We introduced a colleague vaccination program in the interest of protecting the health and safety of our colleagues and the communities in which we serve, in which we operate.
We've read that your vaccine mandate was using your own batch of vaccine, especially imported for Pfizer, which was not tested by the TGA. Is that correct?
Senator, so Pfizer undertook to import a batch of vaccine specifically for the employee vaccination program, and that was so that no vaccine would be taken from government stocks that was being delivered to clinics as needed.
Thank you. Did you enforce your mandate on your colleagues, your employees? Did you enforce it? Did you sack anyone or refuse to pay anyone who refused to take the injection?
Senator, we aligned with the public health guidance. We permitted accommodations or exemptions for people that had specific medical or religious reasons that they did not or could not be vaccinated. A small number of colleagues departed the company.
So that's the way to speak to Pfizer. Alex, I think you want to add something here.
Indeed. Well, the first thing I'd say about that marvellous clip of Senator Malcolm Roberts is Pfizer has once again demonstrated when the going gets tough, you need a Scots lawyer to get you out of the hole. But it's not just Australia where these kinds of denouements are happening. Here we have the German Federal Health Ministry giving a written reply to a parliamentary question asked by Roger Beckamp of the AfD, Alternative for Germany party. Just given by the parliamentary undersecretary, who is a member of parliament but allied with the health ministry. He's replying. And as you can see, somebody's helpfully translated it in the inset. This is question 7/456 of last month. Does the German federal government have figures from placebo-controlled, randomized and blinded scientific studies that provide statistically significant evidence that subjects treated with your jab have overall suffered from fewer medically undesirable events than subjects who received the placebo, which was saline solution. If you have this evidence, or this figures, what are they? And what's the date of the most recent analysis of the numbers at which time the criteria of placebo-controlled randomized and blinded trials were still met? And so, no, the German government does not have such figures. So that hand-in-glove relationship between Pfizer, which insists there is private, and the governments of any Western countries needs further bottoming out. The show notes under this episode will have not just Senator Malcolm Roberts' video, more of that in extra time, but also Senator Gerard Rennick, who was pressing Pfizer on whether COVID spread as they had predicted in their alarmist predictions.
Well, thank you, Alex. And just staying with jabs, I just want to clarify a couple of things. So at the moment, we've got warnings out because there's a new COVID variant called EG 5.1, Eris. Eris in Greek apparently means strife, so not looking terribly good in that direction. It's just been announced that COVID jabs and flu jabs will not be offered to the under 65s. Those in care homes and those that are at clinical risk, frontline health workers and the immunosuppressed will be in line first, and they'll be the only ones to receive the free jabs. However, pregnant women will also be eligible. Now, if you are eligible for jabs, which some people are seemingly very keen to have, you'll be able to have both jabs together this year. The NHS have announced it. Or can you? We'll come to that in a minute. Children will not be offered COVID jabs. That's very important to note for something else that's coming on later in this segment. And adults who haven't yet received any COVID injections will also be eligible for the jab. With flu, they seem to want to concentrate on the most vulnerable first. So let's start with flu. And there's a new flu vaccination program starting for schools, primary schools and secondary schools. But I'm just going to focus on primary schools for now. So all primary school children will be offered the nasal vaccine. It looks like children are going to have to protect the elderly again because they play a key part in transmission. So it looks like the children are the firewall, the human shield, if you like. But who benefits? Well, the school benefits, actually. And if you just click onto the next slide, you can see the benefits to the school there. I'm not going to read them all out. And it also gives an idea of how a parent or parental guardian consent will be obtained. So you will receive a leaflet. Moving on, it says also you can refuse, parents can refuse. Please know this because vaccination squads are going to come into schools and you might not know the day, you might not know quite what's going on. Parents and guardians can refuse to have their child vaccinated. And you might just notice at the bottom there, it says a little caveat there. If your child becomes unwell in school after receiving the vaccination, this is what to do. So please watch out for the flu jabs. Now I'm going to stay with jabs. And an amazing article, an excellent article on the Heart website from Dr. Ros Jones, who's a retired paediatrician. And you thought COVID vaccines were for children were over. Now this is about the next COVE trial. And I've just said there are no COVID injections for children. They're not going to be rolled out this year. So why do we need to have a trial? So Dr. Jones has done this very good article, and she says that basically they're going to be trialing 2 types of Moderna vaccines for a booster. So this is going to be the original Moderna and a new Moderna, a 50-50 mix. She also says, if we just click to the next slide, that's it. She says there, right at the top, the trial information leaflet does not mention any direct benefits to the recipients. The aim of the study being to learn more about how it works in the body. I mean, this is not in the best interests, obviously, of the children at all. But what's in it for the children if there's no benefit to them? Well, actually, this is £1,500 on completion of the study. And very concerning because with the cost of living at the moment, many parents are struggling to put food on the table for their families. So I think Dr. Jones's last line on her article was very appropriate. Let's hope parental instincts are more alive than the moral compasses of the trust CEOs, £1,500 will seem like a paltry sum if your child loses this abhorrent game of Russian roulette. So that's the next Cove trial. Staying again with vaccines, I want to thank Sally very much indeed for her email. She sent me an email with regards to her stepmother, who's a retired nurse and 90. She had her 5th COVID jab. It was the Sanofi one, the one that we featured in a couple of newses ago. She had a terrible inflammatory reaction with an itchy rash appearing all over her body, which drove her almost insane with discomfort and the need to scratch. She couldn't sleep, and the rash bled over her clothes and sheets. Whatever was suggested didn't work. But obviously now her daughter, who's a medical negligence lawyer, has done some research and discovered there was squalene, as we'd mentioned before, in the jab. Her stepmom won't be having any more jabs, but quite clearly we're seeing serious adverse reactions already with this injection. So I wanted to take a little bit of a better look at it. So I went straight to the JCVI. Now, they don't publish their minutes for quite a while after their meetings, but they published their minutes. This was in February, and it was the advice. And they only meet teleconference. So this is all done over teleconference. All these decisions are made. So they decided to review the Sanofi GSK Vid-Prevotine beta COVID-19 booster vaccine. They had Sanofi there as representatives, and they also had the Finnish to represent. No one decided to name the GA. If you just click on a slide, so that's who was in attendance there. So you can see that Professor Wei Shen Lim. But Dan, I've just highlighted there the representatives of Sanofi GSK. They weren't mentioned. We don't know who they were. So it's all very secretive and confidential. So what has actually the MHRA said about this new booster? Well, the MHRA summarised the current regulatory perspective on the AS03 adjuvant. Now, this AS03 adjuvant is very important because it was a component of the Pandemrix. Do you remember that vaccine back in 2009 that caused all sorts of side effects, in particular narcolepsy? So this injection has got that same ingredient. They ask the questions, but they didn't seem to get many answers. The safety concerns are identical to those that were seen before, but nobody's answering any questions. And actually, the MHRA asked more questions about this injection. They asked if it was compatible with other injections, because seemingly other people have had lots of different injections, whether it's a mRNA or whether it's a viral vector. But actually, what they're asking here is it okay to give this injection after someone's had, and that's Novavax, they're talking about the Novavax primary course. And clearly, due to a lack of data, even the MHRA couldn't comment on the likely efficacy and safety of it. So, we're already doomed because now the MHRA aren't even being answered their questions. Also in that meeting, the vaccine supply was talked about. But again, it wasn't recorded in the minutes as it was commercially sensitive information. And we had a team from Finland too there presenting on narcolepsy. So I'm very concerned that this injection is being rolled out with pretty much no safety data at all. But please watch this space, and I'm hoping to get some more expert advice on it in the very near future.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you very much, Debbie, for that. We'll go on to the ads break now. We're asking you to support the UK call, and if that means, if you possibly can, we've missed some graphics. I'm very sorry about that, but if you can support us online, share our material and visit our shop, that would be lovely. We've got an advert here for the next interview. This is going out on Thursday with Gemma Cooper. A conversation on life after the BBC. There is, you'll be pleased to know, life after the BBC. And we'll also be talking to Katie Hopkins, that one broadcast on Tuesday next week. Back to Debbie now, and again on the medical side, but we're talking about end-of-life care pathways.
We are. We're talking about end-of-life care, and we're also talking about assisted dying. So my thanks go out to Val, who sent in an email to us. And she said, check the integrated care pathway. It was imported from Canada. Baroness Meaching is still trying to push assisted dying in the House of Lords, saying she has widespread public support. If that passes, my guess is we will get the full Canadian system in the UK, and that is what she's aiming for. This means certain members of the public will be asked by GPs if they wish to help terminate their lives. What a time to do this when the NHS is crumbling and operations delayed. Can you tell Debi? Yes, I was told, and thank you very much. So that's a little piece on assisted dying. And I just felt that I needed to share with you a very brave and a very measured, responsible, incredible young lady who has put out a video on TikTok about the end-of-life care that her mum never received. Let's watch the video.
Then they sent us back home with no aftercare, no help, just hundreds of medications that I was supposed to administer. I've got no nursing background, and okay, so what have I got? I've got 10 milligrams of oxymorph, cyclazine for the anti-nausea and anti-sickness, but we had to change that to haloperidol. Like loads of haloperidol because she was sick. She couldn't eat anything. Diazepam in halves. Omeprazole to protect her stomach lining. I had to make my own charts. The pregabalin, the clopidogrel and ibuprofen that received breakthrough pain. She was on Oromorph. I had hundreds of charts that I had to make myself because they didn't give me any drugs chart. They gave me a bunch of needles and morphine. And then nobody came. The community pain team was supposed to come out. They didn't come out. No one called us. No one kept any of the appointments that they sent us in letters. The phone just didn't ring. And then when you rang the hospital, you couldn't get through to anybody. Sorry, I need to calm down. So every day we called the hospital, trying to get some help. They scheduled her chemo for so far in advance that then they decided there was no point in doing it. They got every appointment wrong. I called Macmillan, the number they gave us, and the Macmillan lady was on leave, on holiday, not responding. She gave me another number. That number didn't work. The night team always said it was the wrong hours. Nobody showed up, and my mum was like begging for anti-nausea injections, and she was at this point making like a death rattle. So I said, I'll give her the injection, and I was texting random people for medical advice, like doctors I used to know from school and people that my dad was friends with. The only time they showed up was when I threatened I would give the medication that she was begging for, because I said, I'm just going to do it, an injection, and I texted, how do I give a subcutaneous injection? Then they showed up, and then they had a massive go at me and told me off and made me feel like a criminal in my house. The way that she found out that she was going to die, they didn't even tell her. This person just arrived and was like, hi, I'm the palliative care team. She didn't even know she was palliative because no one had had a conversation with her. But that's finding out on your doorstep. And by that point, she's so weak, she couldn't eat anything, and I was carrying her around.
I just want to give her a hug. That was Silver Faye. I don't really have many words. That is the United Kingdom in 2023, and it would never have happened on my watch.
And adding to that, although nothing can match the horror of that, this is actually spreading, this attitude of go away and die outside our hospital system. The much vaunted French hospital system is creaking at the seams, it would seem. A viewer in France has sent us this snap of a public health announcement placed by the French government in the press over there. You can see, or if you're listening in audio only, I'll describe that this depicts a man of perhaps 60 years old clutching his gut, not his heart, but his gut. So it could be any number of things, including pancreatic cancer. And he's being told in no uncertain terms, before calling the emergency services number, If I can't get through to my regular treating doctor, I must call 15, which is the French non-emergency number. This is a new campaign as of this summer. Back to you, Debbie, on that actually, because this, of course, is spreading beyond Britain. The thing that I took away from that utterly shocking Silver Fay testimony, apart from her wonderful recall of everything that happened, is that she was effectively told without so many words, go away and kill your mother by overdosing her. And the only time they made a show of not wanting that to be the case is when she, perhaps in an outburst of honesty, said, well, if things go on like this, I'll give her an overdose out of mercy. And then they came round and said, oh, we'll have the law on you if you do that. I think that's utterly disingenuous, don't you?
And completely. I mean, I apologise for earlier. It's a very emotional piece. That could be any one of us. And it's just completely wicked. This is what dying is come to in the United Kingdom in 2023. It's absolutely shocking. Shocking.
Yes, a good friend of mine recently lost the mother, and they were left essentially alone, getting involved in extremely hard nursing, 24/7 care, whilst the couple, one was expecting a baby and the other one was holding down a full-time job. And the help just wasn't there. Eventually there was some assistance that came, but it was months and months of just tremendous struggle before the support started to appear, and they were left very much alone. And there must be thousands of families up and down the country in exactly that position. Debbie, thank you very much for that. We'll move on now to libraries and wars over information and knowledge and books. Books have become political. Here we see the Yorkshire Post reporting, quoting Helen Boyce, books relating to gender identity were removed from Yorkshire libraries due to an internal HR matter, not politics. And this, the Yorkshire Post explains that recently journalists, it was the Telegraph, I think, uncovered Calderdale Council libraries removing books from shelves. This received some pushback in the local community from a councillor who said, whilst I appreciate this is a sensitive topic, we live in a liberal democracy with freedom of speech, freedom of thought and individual liberty enshrined in our way of life. These principles are the differentiating factor between the Western democracies and totalitarian states. So these actions of the council are entirely unacceptable. And what he was told is the decision to remove certain books from the library shelves was not political. It was a consequence of an internal human resources matter, and as such cannot be discussed further. So its HR department had made this decision, and it's now secret because it's the HR department, apparently. Secrecy is a pattern we're seeing, obviously, more and more. And this problem with libraries has been happening for some time. A slightly older story here relating to Devon. Enid Blyton novels being removed in a bizarre new woke driver. Enid Blyton's getting cancelled. This was discussed in the New York Times back in February 2022. The battle for the soul of the library. Stanley Kurtz here arguing that the Bill of Rights in America and the pledge and conduct of American librarians had been to provide materials and information representing all points of view and to be neutral. But it continues by vowing ideological neutrality in the provision of knowledge. Librarians enable readers to develop opinions based on broad consideration of the available alternatives. In contrast, librarians who allow their personal politics to control or curtail the provision of information, violate neutrality, betray the public trust. A woke librarian is a contradiction in terms. And despite this, they do exist. Woke librarians, but librarians who see it as their duty to promote views on race, policing, sexuality and other issues are everywhere. And he's commenting that this is a lesson that we should be viewing through all aspects of society, including the judges and government bureaucrats and journalists that the old tradition of neutrality and telling the truth and being fair-minded and allowing both sides to be heard should be maintained. Now, he that article was responded to in an article signed by 5 very senior librarians in America, and you can tell the condescending tone here, the slight hint of contempt when they say, once more for those in the back, libraries are not neutral. And they say here it's important that librarians uphold our commitment to the important equity work. Equity is equal outcomes. It's individual injustice in the guise of greater justice. We must stand up to ill-informed attempts to mischaracterise and politicise our work. We must make sure that our work is truly understood in our communities, and we cannot allow political actors to turn woke librarian into a bogeyman. Let us elevate the truth instead. America's librarians are dedicated, trained, frontline professionals working to promote equity in our communities and to help preserve democracy and truth-telling in our society. So they're promoting equity. They're no longer providing information, promoting equity, a political agenda. Now, if you thought that couldn't get worse, it can. Here we have the British Library. The British Library. Their staff are going to get emotional support to help them add trigger warnings to the archive. And why are they doing this? Well, again, it's the cultural Marxist agenda. In this case, anti-racist. And they continue. The group made these recommendations, was launched in the wake of the anti-racist organisation Black Lives Matter, an American organisation also known as By Large Mansions, without any real link to Britain at all. Chief Librarian Liz Jolly told staff, the murder of George Floyd has shown that we're good at saying we don't believe in racism, but I have to say as Chief Librarian that we haven't done enough to ensure that this organisation is anti-racist. Now, I would point out that anti-racist ideology is one which seeks to discriminate based on race to increase equity. It's not about being not racist. It's quite different from that. Also in America, the head of the American Libraries Association is now a Marxist lesbian, Emily Drabinski. The Daily Mail reports here. She's now taking some flack, and Montana is the first state to officially cut ties with the oldest library trade organisation in the US. And many other American lawmakers are looking to do the same. And what did she say when she was appointed? I just cannot believe that a Marxist lesbian who believes that collective power is possible to build and can be wielded for a better world is the president-elect of the American Libraries Association. I'm so excited for what we will do together. So it's all about collective power. It's about control. And that brings us, Debbie, to the Labour Party.
Well, yes, thank you. Going completely off topic a little bit. I was shocked to look at this document. I found this document called A New Britain, Renewing Our Democracy and Rebuilding Our Economy. And it seems a foregone conclusion that Labour are going to get a landslide next year at the general election. And everybody seems to say they don't know what they're doing. Well, I can tell you they do. So who is this commission? If you go and look and see who's on the commission, you'll see that it's led by Gordon Brown, none other than Gordon Brown. And you've got Annalise Dodds, the Shadow Chancellor at the moment. You've also got Aisha Hazarika, the journalist too, and a few more names. Now, I looked through this document and I thought, right, well, what's on the agenda? What's it all about? And you can see actually from the front page and just the contents that it all looks a little bit dark. It's a really big document. I would advise everybody go and look at it, because if you want to see what Labour have got planned, this is it, mixed with the future of Britain. So let's see what they've got planned for the NHS, because the NHS in particular, they seem to be very reliant on the MHRA. I've highlighted it there in bold red because they're really reliant on an independent and well-respected medical regulator that can speed up the clinical trial process, not by taking shortcuts, of course, but by joining up every bit of the system. And they're also honing in on the life sciences. But they also, and this is where it's going to be interesting with Alex, because it seems as though they're changing the constitution. They want to change the constitution and renew the purpose of the United Kingdom. So the political, social and economic purposes of the UK as a union of nations. And I just saw that union of nations and got a little bit troubled by it, but they're doing more than that. There's all sorts of things littered in this document. And just to go through very, very quickly, the big takeaways that I got were that they were basically putting into action now how to change the constitution. They're already doing it. They want a second chamber in the House of Commons, and this is going to contain the Council of England, the Council of Scotland, the Council of the North. We're going to have double devolution, and we're going to have mayors. Keir Starmer being propped up by Tony Blair one side and Gordon Brown the other appears to want to carve up the United Kingdom into tiny little bite-sized portions. So please go and look at that document if you want to know what's coming up, because it's not good.
Alex, with some news from Ireland and the attack on free speech.
Yes, Debi's apt metaphor there at the end of the propping up gave me a horrible vision based on Moses and Aaron and Hur holding his hands up as he intercedes in the course of the battle. But how do you change a constitution in the Irish Republic? Well, of course, it has one of the finest constitutions, as we've often reported on UK Column News, anywhere in the world. And every single article in the section of that constitution which guarantees individual and inalienable rights has been attacked by fraught referendum processes in the last decade or more. But still, the Irish government, or the deep state beneath it, prefers to use constitutional significance statutes, as Labour is proposing to do there, as Debi outlined, when it can get away with it, instead of changing the constitution, which is a bit obvious and drastic to all. Helen McEntee, who we've reported on recently, is the Justice Minister in Dublin. And she's with Fine Gael, which is a centre-right party. The Burkean, which is a repository of think pieces that's sceptical about the tyranny that's descending on the Irish Republic, is reporting here that Helen McEntee is perhaps no longer the golden girl, the candidate, or no longer the shoo-in for the next Taoiseach or Prime Minister, because of the work she's done to make the hate crime bill her banner, really. And we've already reported it's been put back to autumn, but it might not get that far. Fine Gael, her party, may revolt against her. It was crime under a Fine Gael minister, Nora Owen, that cost them the election a generation ago when Blair was elected in Britain the same time. And the youth ring, Ogra Fianna Fáil's, called for the resignation of Helen McEntee, even though she likes to pose as a feminist and a right-on modern thinker. She hasn't got the youth wing of her not her own party, but Fianna Fáil, the centre-left party, with her. So she may be forced to lean on her sword, as it were. She's been posited as the Irish AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, because of her wokery. But even the Dublin political scene is finding that it's maybe too much. And behind a paywall, but we'll just flag it up in passing, the Business Post in Ireland has a Fianna Fáil member of the Dáil, Jim O'Callaghan, saying that hate speech law is deeply problematic. If you tap that again, we'll see his image. And it's confusing the courts and the police, the Garda Síochána. And the subtitle of that is that the hate crime bill, which is possibly on ice indefinitely now if Helen McEntee is out on her ear, it could end up criminalising people because of just ill-considered abusive comments, for which the Irish, I may dare to suggest, are well known, made at the time of an offence, when in fact they were not motivated by hatred. Could we see pushback even in Ireland? It's possible. While we're on Ireland, and the sharp-eyed will have spotted the name Helen Joyce appear already in the West Yorkshire story a moment ago with libraries. Helen Joyce is a very remarkable, high-powered mathematical thinker who used to be with The Economist, the London title. She's now a full-time campaigner and advisor on the gender wars, because she's an old-style feminist who believes in two genders. We're going to listen to a purple passage at the end of a recent interview she gave. Again, as usual, it will be in the show notes if you want to find the source. The interview was with Peter Boghossian, a notable champion of free speech who travels the English-speaking world having debates in public. And here she's going to explain to us why the rearguard action for complete wokery, particularly the pushing of trans ideology on children, is going to be fought to the death by certain people, even when the rest of the political caravan has moved on. So even if McEntee and her equivalent in other jurisdictions do get sacked, there'll always be this rearguard action. Why? Helen Joyce explains to us now in 2 minutes.
And the trouble is, there's a lot of people, something that you may not have thought of is that there's a lot of people who can't move on this, because that's the people who've transitioned their own children. So those people are going to be like, the Japanese soldiers who were on Pacific Islands and didn't know the war was over.
Right.
They've got to fight forever. This is another reason why this is the worst social contagion that we'll ever have experienced. A lot of people have done the worst thing that you could do, which is to harm their children irrevocably because of it. Those people will have to believe that they did the right thing for the rest of their lives, for their own sanity and for their own self-respect. So they'll still be fighting. And each one of those people destroys entire organisations and entire friendship groups. Like, I've lost count of the number of times that somebody has said to me of a specific organisation that has got turned upside down on this. Oh, the deputy director has a trans child, or, oh, the journalist on that paper who does special investigations has a trans child, or whatever. The entire organisation gets paralysed by that one person. And it may not even be widely known at the organisation that they have a trans child, but it will come out. Like, people will have sort of said it quietly, and now you can't talk truth in front of that person, and you can't. Because what you're saying is, you as a parent have done a truly, human rights abuse level of awful thing to your child that cannot be fixed. There are specific individuals who are really actively against women's rights here, and it's not known why they are, but I happen to know through the back channels that it's because they've trans their child. And so those people will do anything for the entire rest of their lives to destroy me and people like me, because people like me are a standing reproach to them. I don't want to be. I'm not talking directly to them. I don't spend my time bitching about them. But the fact is that just simply by saying we will never accept natal males in women's spaces, well, it's their son that we're talking about. And they've told their son that he can get himself sterilised and destroy his sexual function, and women will accept him as a woman. And if we don't, there's no way back for them and their child. They've sold their child a bill of goods that they can't deliver on. And I'm the one who has to be bullied to try to force me to deliver on it. So those people are going to be the people who will keep this bloody movement going, I'm sorry to say, because they've everything to lose. And it's a fight to the death as far as they're concerned.
Now, whereas the British intelligentsia and the Irish intelligentsia perhaps have only one Helen Joyce, the Poles have thousands of people who will do the same on campaigning vans. Notes from Poland reports why this hasn't gone quite the same way in Ireland. Hate crime there would be processed through the courts, and so you get vans like this with the pretty obvious website title stoppedophilie.pl showing up at pride marches. This footage is from a few years ago because in the city of Gorzów Wielkopolski, in, shall we say, the more pro-LGBT part of the country, the further west you go, the more pro-LGBT. In 2019, this van showed up saying homosexuals are much more likely to molest children, stop the rainbow plague, and the LGBT lobby wants to teach 4-year-olds masturbation, 6-year-olds sexual content, and 9-year-olds their first sexual experience and orgasm. This went through the court of first instance with the van driver being charged and convicted. It was overturned on appeal because truth turned out to be a defense. The judge in the appeal court ruled that this cannot be hate speech because it's actually true. For example, that homosexuals are far more often likely to molest children than the background population.
And the comments made earlier on what they're teaching children, we've covered this before in UN documents, so it's very factual. Debbie, I think you now have a piece on E. coli.
Yeah, sorry about this, folks, for anybody that's having lunch. We've been saying to people to keep an eye out for E. coli for a number of reasons, including the injections, which we'll come back to on another news. So the Mail have put out this story that the UK HSA have put an urgent warning to parents over a mysterious E. coli outbreak that has killed 1 Brit and hospitalised 6. Now, they haven't said where this is, and they're also not, that they're saying that they're not quite sure if the one person that died of E. coli. So it's all a little bit vague, but we did say to watch out. There's also a very good article in The Guardian, actually. Refugee barges, sewage and E. coli, of course, my favourite subjects. So E. coli is definitely on the agenda. And in Northern Ireland, swimmers are being advised not to enter the water at North Down beaches because of high E. coli levels. And I have to say that on the front page of The Guardian today, I went out and got it today, you can see there, it's top of the headlines, water companies face £800 million legal action over raw sewage allegations. And this is only the first case with 6. But if you do get sick with E. coli, please remember that wash your hands. Hygiene's always a good thing. But if you do get sick, you might not be able to see your GP because they're threatening to go on strike. So we're not quite sure whether they will or not, but they don't want to work Saturdays and evenings. And if that wasn't bad enough, the consultants have now announced that they're going to be going on strike again in August, 24th and 5th of August, and then again on the 19th and 20th of September. So if you do get into a hospital, I'm not quite sure who you will be seeing.
Thank you very much, Debbie. It's been fairly heavy news, been a lot of serious topics, so we like to finish on a lighter note, and that in this case means Humza Yousaf and Scottish politics. And here we have the bold boy. Now, it transpires that we've now had a huge data dump of the Scottish Government's credit card. And in 3 years, the Scottish Government has spent on their credit card £14 million. And we've got a big data dump on where some of the money's gone. Well, we've had nail polish, yoga classes, staff members driving theory tests, China crockery for a meeting room, and a £27 home disco from eBay. So, spending your money wisely. But of more hilarity, we had 6 copies of a book of speeches by Nicola Sturgeon and 21 copies of a book entitled How to Run a Government, so that citizens benefit and taxpayers don't go crazy. Now, Humza Yousaf insisted that civil servants reading books about governing well is not a bad thing. Not so fast, Humza. This is the book, How to Run a Government so that citizens benefit, by Michael Barber. And who is Michael Barber? His tenure as the head of the Prime Minister's delivery unit during the Blair government, in which he pioneered metric and target-driven approaches to running public services, documented in his 2007 book, Instruction to Deliver. Fighting to Transform Britain's Public Services, a candid memoir chronicling his work with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and the new Labour government. So that is what is informing the Scottish civil servants, to the delight of Humza Yousaf, it would seem. And now over to Alex for a few final thoughts.
Of course, August is silly season, and part of that is the Edinburgh Festival, and particularly its Fringe, where the really off-the-wall stuff happens. Unheard has picked up on the Daily Telegraph original report on what went on when the outgoing, very young MP for Paisley, south of Glasgow, Mary Black, who was the youngest elected parliamentarian in Britain for centuries, she's, by the way, thrown in the towel and says she's not standing again because she says that the Conservatives in the chamber are rectums. She used a demotic word for rectums. She, in her parting shot, told an interviewer at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival that anyone who disagrees with her, tap this again, is a 50-year-old Karen, but she's not the ageist or the sexist or the woman hater. Oh no. So speaking at the Fringe, Mary Black said that feminists who oppose gender ideology, that would be the likes of Helen Joyce, whom you've just heard, are comparable with white supremacists, and that trans activists face opposition exclusively from religious right money. So the money is a problem because it's Baptists, those wicked Baptists in America, and anti-abortionists are the source of the problem. And she was asked whether people who hold different views from herself, perhaps within her own party, one thinks of Joanna Cherry, are allowed to hold those views. And it was refined to the question, can someone with a different philosophical position to you on gender be thoroughly decent? And she said, and she was applauded for it, this being the Edinburgh Fringe, if you keep it to yourself, aye.
Silencing opposition. This is the way it's being done in Scotland, and you're only allowed to think thoughts that the government doesn't approve of, not speak them. This is obviously deeply Orwellian. I think you've got a small video to finish, Alex.
Yes, this is less than a minute. Those who follow football, doesn't include me, will know this, particularly those who follow women's football, that's even fewer. It's been the Women's World Cup in the last couple of weeks. This is a BBC World Service journalist in the background, the disembodied voice you will hear, whose name hasn't been released, interestingly, being given his chance to ask a question to the captain of the Moroccan women's football squad, Ghislaine Chebak. And we may make this an occasional series. I can't promise it will be weekly or that it will always be in the unfinally slot, but I'm going to call this the BBC Tin Ear of the Week. Have a listen to Ghislaine Chebak on the right of your image being asked this very appropriate and sport-related question about her players.
Thank you. This is a question for Ghislaine Chebak. In Morocco, it's illegal to have a gay relationship. Do you have any gay players in your squad, and what's life like for them in Morocco?
Sorry, this is a very political question, so we'll just stick to questions related to football, please.
It's about people. It's
Thank
got
you.
nothing to do with politics. Please let her answer the question.
شرف سرجاني ماتش بريس
What you heard at the end there was an actual football question from Match Press, so he lost his opportunity there. The FIFA woman you could hear off screen was not convinced that this was a completely apolitical question. It was a bit reminiscent to me, David, of that NGO person at the UN some years ago who famously asked, Algeria, where are your Jews? Well, staying with North Africa, this was a case of Morocco, where are your gays? That's the BBC's priority. A couple of, and finally, images from me. A quote by Nicolas Gomez Davila. In a century where the media publish endless stupidities, the cultured man, or woman if you're Maori black, is defined not by what he knows, but by what he ignores. I thought that got to the heart of the matter. And if we go too forward, because I've missed a slide out there, this is a rather interesting Dutch master retake. This is Dr. Fauci on his way out. If you read Debi's blog, which is on ukcolumn.org right now, you will see who is replacing Fauci. And this is called The Science TM. He's holding up a vial there.
Yes, trademark. Trademark is everything in the world of Fauci. Alex, Debi and Di, thank you all very much. All three are going to join us in extra time. And we'll be able to dig into some of these topics in considerably more detail, and we do hope that you will join us for that. Next news will be on Friday, and there's a broadcast interview tomorrow, Thursday, on surviving and life after the BBC. We hope you will join us for both of those. Until then, until extra time, thank you very much. Goodbye.